My 2016 Honda NC750X has just turned over 90,000 kilometres. So it's time to do the regular oil and filter change.
Okay, so let's get into it. First job, put on some gloves. Everyone knows dirty hands, dirty mind. So I try to fool people by putting on gloves. I don't need many tools for this job. A 12mm ring spanner, a number 5 hex key wrench. A filter removal tool is useful too, and I buy the filters that fit this. Something to catch the old oil in, and something to put the old oil in ready for disposal. Of course I'll need some new oil and a new filter. These are the filters that I buy. I'm not going to get into the argument of which filter is best or what sort of oil you should get. Just look up the manual and then make your own choices. To easily access the filter and the drain plug, it's just a matter of taking off a couple of screws and this cowling comes off. Just be careful when you remove and also install the cowling to not lose those little rubber plugs. Sometimes they can come out and you don't notice it. This step only applies to me because I've got a sump guard, so there's 4 bolts that hold that on. It really doesn't matter whether you drain the sump first or take the filter off first. In this instance I'm taking the sump plug out first, and it's a 12mm head. I like to drain the oil when it's cold. Because it's a wet sump, all the oil drains down into the sump anyway, so I don't really see the necessity of draining the oil when it's hot. And I don't particularly like the feeling of hot oil on my hands or a hot exhaust on those gloves either. Just for your viewing delight, I'm just going to put a bit of oil on this paper towel, and you can see the oil is quite dark. That's nothing to worry about. Oil always goes dark when it gets hot in an engine, but you can see how clean the oil really is. Of course you always should replace this washer, but because I'm a lazy mongrel, I rarely bother, and I've never had a problem with it leaking. While the oil's draining, there's an opportunity to check the fluid level. The easiest way to do that is to shine a torch from the back. That clearly shows where the level's at. My level's down a little bit after settling down after I replaced the fluid last. So it's just a matter of taking off the cap and popping a little bit more in. Refer to your manual for the proper type of fluid to put in the bike. Recheck with the torch, and yep, it's sitting on the upper level. The oil's pretty well drained, so just give it a bit of a wipe over. Doesn't matter if a few drips come out after that. And then replace the plug. You, of course, would use a torque wrench for this process, but I'm just going to tighten it up just nice and firm. Not too tight, just firm. Time for the oil filter. Now these oil filters have the pattern for the tool to go onto. And they're already pre-greased, so I don't need to put any oil on that O-ring. The filter should come up fairly easily. The tool just helps a little bit. Theoretically, I could just undo it with my hand, but sometimes it's just a tiny bit tight after being on there for 10,000 K. But you can see how easily that just undid. Okay, that's drained enough, so just give it a wipe over with the rag to make sure there's no grit in the area where the rubber seal's going to go back on, and I tighten it up by hand. As you can see, I'm just tightening it by hand. I don't use the tool to tighten it because you can over tighten it and then the seal will be compromised. Where I live, old oil can be disposed of at the tip. So long as the oil is in a container, they take it for free. So that can sit and drain while I go and put the bike back together again. And just for me, I'll need to put the sump guard back on before I put the plastic cowl on. There are two push plugs on either side of this cowl, and it's important to just get them lined up right, or you can end up pushing the rubber plug out and losing it. I keep my old oil in a different section of the garage to my new oil, but just to be sure, I write on the old container. Now I need to consult my technical service manual as to how much oil goes in it. 3.4 with the filter. Okay. So I've got 3.4 of these jugs to put in the bike. As you've probably found out already, my bike is a manual transmission, not a DCT, so you're not going to see the DCT options here. But if you're going to do any service yourself, you should follow a workshop manual, not some idiot on YouTube, because I could clearly lead you astray. This bike I bought from new, and I've done all of the services on it. A Honda dealer has never seen the bike. Yes, I know it could possibly compromise a warranty, but I've never had a problem, and I've never had to claim a warranty. And subsequently, I've saved a huge amount of money by doing all the work myself. But that's just my choice. You, of course, would not be stupid enough to do that. Pouring the oil can be a bit of a slow process, so I'm sitting on my wheelie chair relaxing and thinking nice thoughts, while the lovely, clean, honey-like oil drains into the bike. Well, I've done that 3 times, and now for the last little bit, the 400 ml. I don't usually bother checking the oil level after I've filled it up. I found that it's good enough. However, just in case you're interested, checking the oil level is a process of just putting the dipstick in without screwing it in. So with a nice clean dipstick, just pop it in and then have a look at where it comes up to the point. And that one in the middle is the full mark, and the one at the bottom is the time to top a bit up mark. At 90,000 kilometres, this bike is still using absolutely no oil between oil changes. A very good engine. But of course it only remains a very good engine if it's maintained properly. Last step is just to start it up and circulate the new oil around.
Well, there you go, all finished. It's now ready for riding another 10,000 kilometres. Yes, I do it every 10 because it's easier to remember. The manual says every 12. It's so satisfying to do the job yourself.
I'm pretty satisfied with how this bike has stood up to the 90,000 k. The fork legs are still beautiful and perfect. Even the paint is almost perfect, just the odd chip here and there from stones. If I look really closely, there's just a little bit of corrosion on that aluminium plug, but that could easily be fixed if I could be bothered. The swing arm still showing no sign of rust. There are slight scuff marks on the aluminium bits near the foot pegs, but the side cases and the engine still perfect. So I'm happy to keep this bike and maybe do another 90,000 kilometres on it. We'll see.